Hi guys, so I'll start off with a first-hand account which is featured in Swordsman of the British Empire by D.A. Kinsley with an intro by yours truly. So it's from Frederick Reinhardt, who was an adventurer in Napoleon's army in Egypt, and he had an encounter with a British naval officer in 1798. And he says, "I had a hot single-handed fight with the officer in command of the sailors. It was like a duel. He began by firing a shot at me with his pistol, which grazed my head and blew my cap off. He then drew and set on me with his cutlass, but we had not exchanged half a dozen passes before I found that I was by far a better fencer than him. For a minute or two I played with him, and then, parrying a stroke which he aimed at my head, I ran my sword through his heart, when with a loud cry he fell dead. With such force that had I delivered my thrust, that my sword was wrenched from my hand, and I had some difficulty in recovering it." I'll just finish off with what he says. So that's the important part of what I want to say. He actually finishes with saying, "Never in my life had I fought as keenly as I did in this duel. So great was my hatred of the English." Well done, a good proud Frenchman that. So really, I wanted to use that to highlight the fact that thrusts did, contrary to things I have maybe implied in other videos, thrusts through someone's heart will often be instantly fatal. Okay? However, I would say he was quite lucky because, as I've mentioned in other videos and I've read other accounts out, it was not uncommon at all for a person to run their sword point into someone else's body and for it to not be fatal, at least not immediately, and for that opponent to hit them back. In this case, he was lucky. He got him through the heart, killed him instantly, and the guy didn't hit him back in return. But really, the point there, the reason I picked that particular account, was because you note that his sword went so far into the other person's body, and the body then presumably went limp and fell over, that the sword was wrenched out of his own hand, and he had some difficulty to get the sword back out. Now imagine if he had been immediately attacked by one of the other enemies. He would have been screwed, basically. Okay? And this is the point I want to make, really, is that in modern sport fencing, whether you're doing foil or épée, or indeed if you're doing historical fencing with flexible weapons and blunt tips, people, I think, very often forget that a thrust has to go into a body and has to come out again before you can really do anything at all with the sword. Okay? Now there are sources which recommend you run the sword fully into the person's body and grapple with them, or if you've got a left-hand dagger, for example, you then stab them with the dagger as well. But generally speaking, with single sword against single sword, or indeed single sword against anything, you have to run your blade into the person and get it out before you can defend yourself either from that person you've just stabbed or someone else who then attacks you. Okay? So it's very important to remember that in your training, or indeed if you're just looking at some other aspect of understanding swordsmanship or martial arts, even if it's to do with modern self-defense, stuff to do with knives, for example. The weapon must be freed before you can use it again. And it was not uncommon. There are many of these accounts, many of them contained in this book indeed, and many that aren't in this book as well, of weapons essentially becoming disabled because they were stuck in a person's body. And there's a World War I account I've read, which unfortunately I didn't make a note of, I'll have to go and find it again, whereby someone bayoneted an opponent and went into the rib cage and essentially got stuck there, and they couldn't withdraw, they couldn't advance, they couldn't get their weapon out, and they had to actually unclip the bayonet in order to free their rifle and reload their rifle and carry on. So there you go, weapons have to go in and out, and sometimes, and not too rarely, they got stuck in a person. Okay, thank you.